Hey everyone. Alright, so this episode marks the official end of Wano in the anime, and I figured I'd start this review by giving my overall thoughts on the adaptation in its entirety, because honestly, when looking back on Wano as a whole, it's kind of interesting to talk about it in context of the anime, because right out of the gate, I will say, while you could make the argument that Wano kind of suffers from the same pacing issues a lot of big major a lot of big grand scale One Piece arcs like Fisherman Island and like Dressrosa have suffered from. I honestly think more than any of those other arcs, Wano is the arc where Toei had tried to make the most out of a bad situation, and how even when they needed to slow the pacing down, they still everyone involved, whether director, animator, artist, storyboardist, everyone involved on the crew endeavored to try and add what little bits they could, and just in general, it always felt like the crew involved were always asking themselves, how do we expand upon this material, or in the case of many other later episodes, how do we elevate the material? And honestly, I'd say a good 85-90% of the time when it came to Wano, it like just going in with that mentality, I think did pay off. Like I think I'd say the only time in regards to the adaptation where this mentality didn't work was probably the first few chunks of episodes with Luffy in the prisoner mine. To me, that's the one point in Wano's adaptation where I did genuinely feel more or less like I was dealing with a lot of with the type of pacing you'd see in Dressrosa, and generally needed to cut, and the crew was trying to cut as many quarters as they could, but honestly, once they made it over that little hurdle, is when I think things did pick up again. Like, even looking back on some of the slower episodes in the back half of this arc, they aren't as bad as I might have made them seem in some of my reviews. Like, at worst, I thought a lot of those slower episodes in the back half of them were just kind of okay. Like, they weren't terrible. They were just okay. But yeah, so as a whole, like, again, production-wise, I think this is the most consistent that One Piece has been in a long time, honestly. I know that's weird to say for an arc that has a lot of episodes, but everything just felt right. Like, again, there were fumbles, there were foibles, but none of it felt jarring to me, I guess is what I'm saying. But I don't know. With that said, though, yeah, let's talk about our animation with this arc, because I remember back when we were at the tail end of the Reverie arc, Toei came out and blatantly said they had to sacrifice, like, the Reverie arc to put majority of their focus on Wano. And while I'm still a little sour they did have to throw such an important setup arc to the Wolves for the sake of Wano, neither can I deny the results. Neither can I deny the results as well. Wano is not without its failings in regards to art and animation, but neither can I deny that Wano, again, is probably their most consistent effort in regards to both time skip. But again, credit where it's due as well. I don't think this was just a one-off thing either, as I'm currently rewatching Whole Cake Island, and honestly, I think post Dressrosa, I think Toei did eventually find more or less a groove in their work schedule, work ethic with post time skip One Piece. Like, outside of the obvious of Megumi Ishitani, who directed and storyboarded episodes 957, 982, and 2015, it's clear Toei really went through a vetting process of trying to get the absolute best people they could on board for Wano for basically every single episode, for every single one of the critical or important episodes when they were needed. Like, this was made no more clear than when episode 1061 and onwards, with getting people like with getting people like Ryoto Nakamura, Ryosuke Tanaka, and Masahiro Hosoda to direct. Like, Toei knew what they were doing and the people they wanted in order on board for these episodes, and they just knew that these were the people who would make the magic of Wano happen. Like Toei knew what they were doing, and obviously that's not even scratching the surface of the storyboarders and animators, because actually one thing I only recently learned is that the Sanji versus Queen finale episode only had 2 credited animators working on it, which were Hifumi Shingaki and Yonsei too. Like, I'm sure there were a few others who might have been outsourced, but yeah, it is impressive when taking into context that those were like the main 2 people working on that episode. But yeah, it's impressive when taking into context. Hell, apparently like 1071, yeah, that 1071 only had 2 animators on it as well, but they really wanted to but they really pulled off Gear 5 and making its debut really stick with us. So yeah, I guess ultimately, I guess what's the point? I guess the question is, what's the point in all this that I'm saying? I guess what I'm trying to say, and what all this amounts to, is what I'm saying is, whatever faults there are in Wano, I still stand my ground in saying that this was Toei at their best in a long time, and a lot of it does come down to that you can see the passion on screen. Like, I'm not saying that we couldn't see the passion before, but you can see how it translated with how that passion perfectly translated with Wano. Like, it never felt like there was ever a point where they truly did stumble and fall, or they attempted to do something and just failed at it, but they really tried their damnedest with this episode, and that I appreciate. They put 100% of their effort into Wano, and it just shows. With that said, though, the episode itself is pretty straightforward, honestly, as it's the Straw Hats basically saying their goodbyes before leaving, but like any typical One Piece episode, there's a few added flourishes that, while maybe not fixing the big issues people have had with the end of Wano, I think still add little contextual details to later, to basically just kind of bringing things in Wano full circle, and even adding a few little things that do add contextual details to later moments in the story, like the scene where we see Chopper in this episode of giving Beppo some kind of drug or pills or whatnot. That is actually going to be something that does play into a moment that happens with Law and his crew a little bit later. But for me, the moment that was added that really got to me, and you'll likely see it as a thumbnail, is when we see Luffy standing on the spot where Oden Castle once stood, and seeing him pay his silent respects to Oden. Like, it's one of those moments that really does show that even if Luffy wasn't able to meet him personally, he still very much respects the man's legacy. And while I'm not going to say this moment fixes anything, I think it is still a nice little detail that adds more to Luffy's perspective about Wano, about the Kozuki clan, and especially about Oden, that you can tell in this moment he's thinking Oden was the kind of man he would have liked to meet, and it is enough of a stark contrast of how things end in the manga, as this moment actually made me realize that Luffy's greater perspective was kind of missing from Wano. Like, don't get me wrong, it was there in small doses, but for me, when looking back on Luffy and Wano, it's clear to me that one of the biggest focuses that there always was with like getting Luffy's perspective on things, it was always in some way like traced back to Kaido. It never really focused in on the actual people he was trying to protect from Kaido. Like, it felt like, and in that regard, I guess you could say there was a little bit of a disconnect. At least, again, this is from my impression I get, but it does feel like that was the case, and that he was But this episode, it finally does give Luffy that moment to reflect on things, which I like. And just in a more general sense, I feel the anime did a better job at making this whole episode feel like much more of a farewell to Wano and the people we've gotten to know within it, a little like much more than the manga did, honestly. Even Sanji got his own special little farewell moment when he was telling Seba on the street to he got to say goodbye and thank you, and he got goodbye to the woman who he saved from Queen, and he got a thank you from her and the little mouse guy too. Like I love that scene with the little mouse. Like nowadays, every time, like knowing what we know about Sanji's backstory now, I'm always gonna get a little bit of a gushy feeling now every time I see Luffy. Every time I see Sanji with a mouse now, for some reason, I don't know why. It's just gonna feel so cute. On that note, though, let's talk about the other two additions in this episode. The first of which is Zoro at Yasui and Pedro's gravesites, paying his respects with a cup of sake. And in a slight parallel to Luffy's moment, I like how getting the time to reflect on the aftermath of Kaido's defeat and paying his respects to Yasui, it gave him perspective of just how powerful Odin was. The fact that Odin was someone who could master Enma shows just how strong Odin was and how strong Zoro needs to be in order to truly master the sword in that same way. And that this, you could say that with him holding Enma now, this is like a brand new starting point for Zoro. Once Zoro truly masters Enma, that is going to become that is the point where he will become the world's greatest swordsman. But even then, looking past all that, I like how we got to see just a sort of final farewell between Hiyori and Zoro. Like, I don't want to give any, at risk of giving like some fodder to the shippers. I do like how getting a farewell between Hiyori and Zoro, it really just show that however minor of a detail it was, just how much their journey has come, that ultimately both Hiyori and Zoro are leaving on good terms with each other and having built respect for each other and for Odin. Like, it's little things like that I think really, little moments of farewell like that really do make this finale stronger. The other moment, though, is the moment between Luffy and Tama, and it's not anything grand. It's just her saying thank you for the. It's just her saying goodbye to Luffy and thank you for the meal. But in terms of the thank you for the meal part, when you consider how Tama's story started in Wano, that's where it starts to tug at the heartstrings a bit. Because before, everyone was struggling just to live, but now Wano is free. It can go back to those times of peace, a time where, for Tama, she rarely knew existed and can now experience it in full thanks to Luffy. She can live a life without worrying about struggling day by day, without worrying, is she going to poison herself in order to survive? And yeah, that does include being able to eat a meal. Like, she can finally sit down, smile, and eat she can genuinely have a smile on her face, have experience happiness every single day, practically experience all the emotions that every single emotions a human being can have day by day, and just eat. And at the end, like, she can smile, she can cry, she can feel fear, she can feel everything. She doesn't have to just live in one perpetual state of like, am I going to die? And it's like, she can finally feel human again. And yeah, it's a moment that really does kind of put, that Tama can now experience these things in full now. And more than anything though, she can just feel happiness every day now. And yeah, seeing that moment where she finally put together seeing that moment of watching Luffy walk away and her finally putting together that Luffy was Ace's brother and saying goodbye to both of them in a fashion. It's one of those, again, I'm not going to say it was necessary, but I do admit it is one of those little touches that, in my opinion, does make the anime's version of this finale better than the manga, because again, while it didn't bother me as much as other people, I do appreciate the effort they did put in there to kind of see her to finally make the connection that, yeah, Luffy and Tama, or Luffy and Ace are brothers. Like I think I don't know how. Yeah, I liked how she did kind of. We did get to see her kind of put that together. That, yeah, it is. It is for her. It's like it's thanks to Ace that Luffy's even here now, and but that Luffy was here to save everyone. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Analyst Crunchyroll, push the notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of Anime signing off. Later, everyone.